All right, so apparently I'm pretty good at pouring a beer. Does everyone miss the kind of beer drinking I was doing in my previous videos? I kind of miss it. Okay, so in this video I want to address some of the color issues I have with the Pocket 4K, mostly when shooting with it, not necessarily with the color in post, because when you shoot in RAW or in a high bit rate codec, it's really not that hard to fix some of your issues in post. But I think for exposing with this camera, it needs a little bit of help. I know a lot of people are gonna shoot RAW with this camera or shoot B-RAW with this camera, and it's gonna give you a lot of room in post to do what you want with the image. But for me, from a practical standpoint, I think a lot of people that are actually shooting with this camera, they probably don't want to deal with the file sizes of the RAW codec. And that's what B-RAW is for, obviously. But here's the deal. I think most of you probably don't use DaVinci Resolve to edit your footage. Now, I personally do, because most of the stuff that I do when I'm editing is just for my own projects, and I have the ability just to use the software that came with the camera, and that's what I edit with. But a lot of you use Final Cut Pro, or you guys use Adobe Premiere. As of right now, Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro does not support B-RAW. So I like to shoot in ProRes HQ as much as I can with this camera. And shooting with ProRes, you really don't want to mess anything up. You want to get your exposure right. That way you have all that latitude in post when you go to color grade it. Now what you'll notice with a lot of other camera companies like Red or Arri or even Canon, a lot of these cameras shoot in their log profiles, but then they have a shooting LUT or a color profile that the monitor will display when you're shooting to help guide you in the right direction for exposure. Of course, you're gonna be checking your histogram or your false color or using a light meter or whatever to get proper exposure. But I found that when you're in a run and gun situation, you wanna be able to just look at the monitor, make sure everything's good to go, and just start shooting. I've used Red a lot in my career, and something that I always like to do is just put it on the Red Gamma 4 setting, but always shoot RAW. But the Red Gamma 4 setting is gonna allow you to see the kind of Rec 7 or 9-ish look while you're filming. So when you're gonna go to light, you'll be able to see what the image is gonna look like most likely in post before playing around with it. This will help you adjust for your light and your lighting ratios without using a light meter. But what I've noticed on the Pocket 4K is that the LUTs that come with the camera aren't very accurate. Now it seems kind of strange to me that Blackmagic, one of the leading companies in color, they make the #1 color software, wouldn't have a better LUT, a better shooting LUT on this camera. That was really strange to me, and it's always been a struggle for me when shooting with this camera. So I've used their LUTs before. You can use the extended video LUT or the Pocket 4K to video LUT. And what those do is, it'll crunch up the image and it'll make it fit inside the color space used on broadcast television and whatnot, that Rec 7 and 9 space. But for me, when I'm shooting with those LUTs, I feel like they just look really bad. Either the LUT is too crunchy, too contrasty, or it's like pretty crunchy, but then they've done some weird stuff with the highlights and the skin starts to look really funny. And on top of that, I don't know if anyone else has noticed with this camera, but if you haven't, if you don't have one and you want some advice on it, it tends to shoot warm. Not only does it shoot warm, it also has a little bit of a red shift to it. So it shoots warm, as in from like a color temperature standpoint, and then the reds seem to come out kind of funny as well. So what I set out to do was fix the issue. I wanted to create a shooting LUT that I could throw on the camera, look at the back of the LCD, and know what I was shooting, know what it was gonna look like, and get an accurate representation of what I was actually trying to shoot. So I believe I did that. It'll also be my version 1 LUT of this, and I will leave a free download in the description. Basically what I've done is I've set myself up in different scenarios, and I've used the slate with color bars on there, and I've created my own kind of Rec 7 or 9 LUT. And then I've also pulled out the red issues that I was having with the camera. Now I didn't do anything crazy with this. All I did was, I created the LUT. I could see that the red had a spike in it, and I just desaturated that red ever so slightly to kind of even out the image and make it more balanced. So let's hop in DaVinci Resolve and look at some of the footage that I've shot with this LUT and see how it compares to the other LUTs that are built into the camera. I threw up some diffusion from inside of a 5-in-1 reflector, and I put that in front of her face to block the sun from hitting her face, but really what that did was take the sun and kind of diffuse it and even out the light, and it's a really pleasant look actually. This is labeled 400 MR, 400 meaning 400 ISO. That is the ISO that's gonna give you the most dynamic range on this camera. That's what I built this LUT for. You will probably have some fluctuations in your dynamic range, which will cause this LUT to look a little more crunchy or less crunchy depending on what ISO you're shooting at. Just remember that going into it. This is not going to be designed for every ISO. This is going to be designed for 400 ISO. This will not be designed for 3200 ISO, which is I know the other native on this camera, but you could probably still use it as a good shooting LUT. I might make another one of those in the future. So the oversaturated reds is a problem that this camera has that I've noticed. And another one is that it's too warm when you're shooting. So what I've always done since literally like a week after I got the camera is when I'm shooting in daylight, I always shoot at 5400 Kelvin. So what I do is I just click the stock daylight setting, and then I pull it back 200 degrees. It's a major flaw, I think, with this camera, and it kind of bums me out, but if you just shoot like this and then you use this LUT, it's gonna help you out tremendously. Another thing to note is I did use the Zomi and variable ND filter. I've used it in my other videos. The link to that is in the description below. It's very cheap, very affordable. It has a little bit of a green cast to it, I believe, but with using this LUT, you can't see that green cast here at all. So once again, I made this LUT as a shooting LUT, not a LUT that you would just drag and drop on your footage to make it look better. I mean, it will make it look better, but it's not a stylized choice or anything like that. This is just to give you a color profile that give you a baseline shooting option when using the viewfinder on the Pocket. You can put this on other monitors too, and I'm sure it would work just as well. I don't know if other people out there were having this same issue, but if you were, I hope this helps you out. If you want to download the LUT, I have it in the description below. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know. I mean, I've done a lot of kind of lighting tutorials and recreations with this camera, as well as other cameras, and it seems like you guys like those a lot too. But if you want to see some more stuff like this, it's more just useful from a shooting perspective, let me know and I'll try to make more videos like this. Until next time, guys, see ya.